Hello, and welcome back to Death and Taxes. This is the weekly live stream podcast from the Australian Taxpayers Alliance. I am one half of your hosting duo, John Humphreys, and I am joined, as always, by Gene Tunny. Gene, how you doing?
Going well, John. How are you, mate?
Top of the world, another beautiful day in paradise. No, actually, it's been going quite well up here. I've really taken to farm living.
Very
I'm
good.
preferring getting outside and actually using a chainsaw rather than sitting here behind the computer. So it's although of course driving a chainsaw doesn't pay.
Right,
yeah. So this is our usual live stream. We are going out live to the YouTubes, the Facebook and X. You can find it at the Australian Taxpayers Alliance on YouTube and Facebook, and my personal account, John Humphreys, on X. Please, wherever you're watching it, give us a like, give us a follow, give it a share. And wherever you're watching it, please go check out the other ones as well. You can find down in the show notes a link to Gene and my X accounts. Go and give us a follow there. Every little bit helps. Just those little likes and shares and follows help to convince the algorithm that this is the sort of stuff that needs to be seen. And I think it is today because we've got an interesting topic coming up shortly. We're going to wait until a few more people get in the room, but of course, the big thing that's been going on that everyone's noticed in the last couple of days is the government's latest attempt at introducing anti-speech laws, which has really blown up on X and has had some interesting political fallout. So we'll go through that topic. We'll go through the actual meat of the topic, and then we'll go through the politics of it and a little bit of the history of these anti-speech laws as well. So we will get into that. But first, before I do that, just a reminder that this is live. You will see our mistakes as we make them, if we make them. Of course, that far be it from me to admit that would ever happen. But this being live, we do take your comments and questions as well. If they are particularly scintillating, we may interrupt what we're doing to have a look at your questions and comments. Otherwise, we might save most of them until the end. But please, as we're going through, feel free to let us know what you think. Comments, questions, criticisms, anything else, starting with Ka. So that's by way of intro, and that's what we've got coming up. But before that, we will start with where we usually start, which is going through Gene's roundup. So that look, most normal people don't watch the economy as closely as Gene does, but it is helpful to be informed about what's happening. So you don't have to watch the economy closely every day, because once a week you can come here and get the quick download from Gene from all the things you need to know about the shape of our economy. So Gene, with that said, I'll throw it to you. And what has happened in Australia and the world?
Very good. Yes. So we'll have a look at some of the latest data, John. And I must say, I mean, you watch it pretty closely yourself. So, I mean, the first thing we want to talk about is the CPI. So we had a bit of a shock toward the end of 2025 when we had a very hot inflation number come in, or much higher than expected, at above 3%. And that's got everyone sort of worried about the Reserve Bank potentially increasing the cash rate in February. Now, that's come off a little bit. It's still above the target band, 2 to 3%. This is in the new figure that came out last week for November. I've put up the annualized quarterly rate for the core inflation measures of the trimmed mean and the weighted median there, which show they're still above 3%, but they've come down a bit from where they were in previous months. So I think what people are now thinking is that Reserve Bank will probably hold. I mean, there is a risk there could be a rate increase, but I mean, that'd be incredibly embarrassing for the Reserve Bank, and they'll do everything to resist doing that. So, I mean, it's very possible they'll hold. Certainly there's not going to be any, well, I mean, I don't think there'll be any rate cuts soon, given the data that we're seeing, and particularly given we're not really seeing the big downturn in the labour market, significant increase in unemployment that might force the RBA or might make them think about cutting if they're worried about the state of the economy. We're having vacancies sort of flatten out there. They slightly dipped in the last quarter, but they're still, much higher than they were before COVID. So there's the job vacancies there. So that's one of the things I've been looking at. The next thing I've been looking at is what's been happening in the housing market, because in October, on 1st of October, the federal government really relaxed the restrictions on their 5% deposit scheme. It boosted eligibility. Essentially, there's no income cap. They significantly lifted property price caps to 1.5 million in Sydney, a million in Brisbane. And what we're seeing is it's just really turbo boosted the housing market. And Cotality put out some great numbers the other day that show how the prices there's been stronger price growth below the cap than above the cap, and so they're taking that as evidence that this has certainly impacted dwelling prices. So one thing I've been looking at there. I mean, this is something that's been predicted. So Nicholas Gruen and I did some work for the Insurance Council in mid 2025 that did predict this sort of thing and got a bit of media. So I mean, it's what we've expected all along. The other thing,
the summary of that is that yet again the policies to improve housing affordability has bumped up house prices.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's an old story, isn't it? And it's because you have this dynamic effect going on where you've got this bring forward of demand from the future, and so you've suddenly got all of these people trying to get into the market at the same time, and then you've got the fear of missing out, the FOMO that's reinforcing that. So yeah, these policies.
It makes perfect sense, but it's the same thing that us economists scream into the wilderness every time these policies come up, that there is no solution on the demand side, and other than just decreasing the amount of people living in the country. But in terms of giving people more money to be able to buy a house, it's going to be pushing up the house prices unless there are simply more houses for people to live in or fewer people needing to live in houses. But I mean, we say that every time the politicians do something different, and then we see the data come in. But unsurprising stats you've got there.
Well, it's the old thing. I mean, it's that old joke in Yes Minister, isn't it? I mean, the politicians, they don't really care whether they solve the problem. They just want to look like they're trying to solve the problem, right? I mean, that's what it's all about. And this looks like something that is solving the problem, whether it does or not. They think, oh, well, we can make an argument. We can argue that things are in our favour. We'll get a nice Instagram post out of it. Anyway, next.
One of my favourite lines from that show, if I can, I've said this one before here, but I do like the one where they say the government's attitude is, we have to do something. This is something, so this must be done. Which I think it's a joke, but it does summarise a lot of what politicians do.
Yes. The other thing I've been looking at, John, is, I mean, you'd be aware that the Trump administration, I mean, Trump's claiming he didn't have anything to do with it, but the Justice Department is investigating Jerome Powell, the chair of the Federal Reserve, and there's now concern, and this is over some renovation that they're doing of Federal Reserve headquarters, which is costing a huge amount of money, over $1 billion or $2 billion US. I mean, it does seem like an extraordinary amount of money, but they are questioning. I mean, it seems it is politically motivated, or there's a hypothesis that it's politically motivated because Trump's mad at Jerome Powell because he hasn't cut interest rates as rapidly as the president would like. And there are all sorts of concerns over central bank independence and, what this means for that. And, the fact that we could end up with poorer inflation outcomes on average because of that. We know that there is a link between central bank independence and inflation outcomes. There's been plenty of research on that. And I think we've seen how, much better on average our inflation outcomes have been since we've had that inflation targeting regime, a more independent central bank since the 90s here in Australia. So I think there's some truth to it. What's interesting is how the market's reacted. Now, everyone's looking at what's happening with gold. And I mean, gold is above 4,500. I think it got up to, it must be around 4,600 USD an ounce at the moment. It's just continuing to surge. Now, Some people were speculating that could be because Trump's going after Powell. I'm not sure about that because for the reason I'm going to talk about in a moment. But it seems to be it's just related to all of the geopolitical uncertainty that's out there. I mean, there's uncertainty. I mean, what's happening with Venezuela? What's happening in Iran? What could be happening? I mean, the ongoing conflict in Ukraine, the conflict in the Middle East, all of these geopolitical factors, and then in the US there's concern about, is there a civil war potentially going to occur in the United States because we have all of this tension that's been driven. Well, I mean, look, there's obviously a concern about illegal immigration, and so Trump got elected on a platform of cracking down on that. But the way that ICE has been essentially, well, I mean, it looks like it's going. It's a bit. They're a bit overzealous in their enforcement actions. Is probably how I'd describe it. And I mean, there was that poor woman who was shot in where was it? It was somewhere in the Midwest. Was it Minneapolis? And look, I mean, she was sort of probably didn't react in the best way, and I mean, the terrible set of circumstances, and she ended up getting killed, and that's causing all sorts of tension in the US at the moment. So look, all this
I got to say, with
say,
the spike in gold, it's going after Jerome Powell. That is one thing, but when they're in a situation where America is looking to have a simultaneous war in 5 different fronts, war with the Ukraine, war with Venezuela, war with Iran, war with Minnesota, that's the one you're talking about, the internal one, and war potentially with Greenland. So a 5-front war, I think, could explain the change in gold prices without even needing to bring Jerome Powell into it, essentially.
Exactly. And that's and the reason I think that's probably what's driving is because if you look at the bond rates, like the bond market initially was a bit sort of shocked by what happened, and there was a slight, well, I mean, it wasn't a huge increase in bond yields, but bond yields rose. But now they're sort of settled back down. Like you don't really see it in the bond market. So all the savvy investors, all of the Wall Street, the people who are making the big bets on the bond market, they just think, oh well, this is all just the standard political theater. This is Trump. We're not particularly worried about this. So I found that interesting. I mean, people think, oh well, this is just what we've come to expect, and they've essentially they're choosing to ignore it at the moment. So all of the just incredible. I mean, just how something that historically, I mean, that would cause a huge shock to the bond market, but perhaps because of the nature of the current president, who is, well, how should we describe him? Theatrical, who does like to, get media attention. Perhaps they're discounting it, and then they go, well, this is just all part of the theater. Trump's pressuring Powell. They probably trust Powell not to give in and to maintain. Not to be influenced by the president on monetary policy. So I think that's what they've concluded. All right, John.
That's stable there for the last 6 months, which is, I mean, that's what you want to look at for the people who don't follow economic data too closely at home. This chart looks nice and boring now. It's worth checking in on this chart now and again to make sure it's still looking boring. Because when this chart starts to spike in unpredictable ways, it is a harbinger of things to come that we don't want to see. And look, a lot of people have been worried about the nature of the US dollar-backed system, given given a lot of the geopolitical changes that have been going on in the last couple of years, and the fact that the US debt is eye-watering and will never be paid off. But at the moment, this nice, boring, flat line shows that people are still fairly secure in the US dollar.
Well,
it might not just that way. So keep an eye on this chart. Keep an eye on this chart every month or two.
Yeah, John, just on that point, I mean, you're right. The US debt will never be fully paid off. I agree with you there, but it doesn't need to be. I mean, we know that as economists. I'm not defending it at all. I'm saying that theoretically it could be paid off, and that's why they're still in a situation where people are lending to the US government. I mean, it's still not in a sort of poverty financing situation, because you could actually theoretically conceive of large enough surpluses to eventually get that debt to GDP under control. I'm not saying they're going to do it. I don't think they'll do it. But
when you say you could conceive of it, that's similar as a way that we could conceive of the aliens coming and giving us, breakfasts full of jelly and ice cream. I mean, I could conceive of it, but we all know that the US is never going to be able to get their budget under control again. I mean, the pressure there to not spike their taxes while still giving everyone their handout, and Trump has just increased the Pentagon budget by 50%. There is no appetite at all on either the Republican or Democrat side to get spending under control or realistically balance that budget. So I think what we've got here is that people are betting on the fact that the system will be manageable for the next 5 to 10 years. So they will be able to buy their bonds and sell their bonds and get out before the crash. People think they're going to be able to see it coming, and they think it's far enough in the future that it's not hitting them. I don't see a world in which this doesn't explode at some stage, but if we are lucky, we can push that explosion off quite far. If they could get the deficit down a bit and have good economic growth, you could push that explosion off. I think that's the name of the game now, but maybe I've just too black-pilled. But I don't actually think there's a realistic chance they get their budget under control. I don't see how, right? I mean, who's going to
not at the moment, not given the current politics of the US, but they have in the past. I mean, there was that moment in the 90s with Gingrich and Clinton when they were able to do a deal. I mean, both were, Clinton was an exceptional politician, and I mean, Gingrich was, very effective as the House Speaker. So, I mean, maybe they were exceptional circumstances. I don't know. I'd like to be hopeful.
There was relatively strong growth there, so strong growth can help. But the issue there, of course, is the main drivers, notwithstanding defense, which, as I said, Trump's just increased the spending by 50%. Any future wars are going to add to that expense. But putting that aside, it's mostly health and aging. And as we've discussed before, we've got an aging population. So health, pensions, and age spending are going to keep going up. And I don't see how we get back to the same demographics we had in the 90s. So I don't see the solution there. And there's never been an ability in America to actually deal with Social Security or health spending.
Yeah, so, very true.
But anyway, enough pessimism from me. Was that your last?
Yeah, that's it, John. It's over to you. I'm very keen to hear your thoughts on the legislation, the proposed bill that the federal government is advancing. So over to you.
Absolutely. Thank you. So yes, the situation we've got for the people watching along at home, feel free, by the way, if you just joined us, chuck in a comment, chuck in questions, feel free to get involved. We'll try to get to some of those questions and comments by the end of the show. But the big news from this week has been the government's attempt to bring in their latest piece of anti-speech legislation, or they'd call it, anti-hate legislation, but they achieve their anti-hate by preventing people from being able to speak freely, of course. So the context for this is we already have. So firstly, I hate the term hate speech, but I'm going to use the term because that's how it's discussed, right? So don't write in the comments saying, don't use the word. Yes, I know hate speech is just speech that the government hates. I get that. But to the degree that it's a word people understand, we already have hate speech laws in Australia. And we have had them since 1995. Right. So the famous 18C, Part 18C of the Racial Discrimination Act, which was brought in by Keating in 1995, which was really the first big specific bit of speech policing we've had in this country. That's been around for a while, and I do not mean to defend 18C, but it's worth noting that is civil law. That is civil law. It is not a criminal charge. You cannot go to jail, right? If you can only get tripped up in that law if someone makes a specific complaint against you, and then you go to a tribunal, and if you're found to be guilty, you've got to make an apology and or potentially pay a fine. But there's no criminal charge in it, right? Now, I still don't think 18C should exist, but that's worth noting, right? So what we're looking at here is it's the first real attempt to take that, strengthen it, and bring it into the criminal code. So what we're going to have now is a situation where if you, what they call incite hate, or if you, I haven't got the rest of the words in front of me, but speak hateful things, then you can be criminally charged and potentially spend up to 5 years in jail. Now, with a criminal charge, there doesn't need to be a complaint. And specifically in this legislation, there doesn't even need to be anyone that was offended or anyone that was angered or anyone who's made to hate anyone. None of that needs to actually have happened. It just needs to be the prosecutor decides that it could have happened. And so this is a dangerous new step, because the other thing that needs to be factored in when getting a holistic view of what we're talking about here, the political and legal betters, the people who rule over us, the people who make up the population of Canberra, are different to us, and they have a very slanted and expansive view of what hate means. So you'd look at this and think, oh, well, they're only talking about, really hateful stuff that I would recognize as hate. There is a cohort out there that can see hate in lots of places where hate might not actually exist. And somehow they miss it in other places, right? There's a very, as I said before, a slanted and expansive view of the concept of hate. And that's the dangerous thing here, right? Because it's going to be the prosecutors who are determining what constitutes hate speech and then what you can go to jail for. And this is based not just on race, but also on nationality. So you can imagine the possibility of getting tripped up here. The other thing you've got to factor in is this has really opened the possibility of an activist judges, activist lawyers, right? So if you have an agenda against someone, it is going to be possible to find a way to squint and look sideways and interpret something they've said as hateful against another country. And lots of people at the moment on X are coming up with quite silly examples, and lots of them are silly examples, but the people who want to come after you are going to come up with well-worded and carefully manicured narratives to explain why your promotion of your love for one country might imply that you are talking down other countries, and that talking down other countries could make people from those countries feel like you're attacking them. And now you've potentially found a hate case. Now, if we only had angels running our court system, we only had angels running our police and running our prosecutorial system, laws like this would be still bad in my opinion, but less dangerous. But we don't only have angels. And if by some chance you think the world is currently run by angels, you have to be sure that it will always be run by angels. And that's not going to be the case. There are people out there who will take advantage of laws to go after their political and personal enemies. And giving them these sort of tools is a dangerous step. And it's a dangerous step that we didn't really need to make. Because, of course, the context for all of this is that these laws are being rushed through. And that's another point worth making. They were brought in on a Tuesday, and the Tuesday this week. Submissions are already closed into their inquiry. Today's Thursday. This is 2 days later. They've had their inquiry. They've closed their inquiry. Submissions are closed, which is a ridiculous amount of time. Clearly, they're not going to read any submissions. They're not going to take that seriously. They're box ticking. And then they're going to bring back Parliament, rush it in on the Monday, vote on it on the Tuesday. That is a total of 1 week. That is a ridiculously small amount of time. And in that week, they want to pass through an omnibus bill that tries to do multiple different things at once, right? It tries to restrict your speech. So it introduces hate speech laws, which restricts what you can say. It also decreases freedom of association by having the government being able to prescribe a group, and it specifically says no due process is needed, right? You don't need due process. Basically, if you have 3 people can get together, the head of ASIO, the head of the Department of Homeland Security, or the equivalent, sorry, the person who oversees ASIO, whichever that minister is, the relevant minister, let's call them, and the Attorney General. Those 3 people get together, and they could basically ban any group with a good cover story, and they'll have a good cover story because ASIO can do that. And they don't even have to tell the group they're being banned until after they're banned. At that point, it would be illegal for that group to even apply to shut down their bank account, right? It would actually be illegal for them to do anything, including shutting down their organization. They would just have to sort of walk away. And so the ability to then trip people up in that is going to be huge. And by the way, that theoretically can apply to political parties, right? This those 3 people being able to get together. It's not a parliamentary act. It's those 3 people being able to get together, the head of ASIO, the relevant minister, and the AG, and they would be able to prescribe groups, any group as a hate group, including a political party. And at that point, that political party couldn't coordinate. They couldn't team up. They couldn't nominate a candidate. They couldn't raise funds. They couldn't have meetings. That would all be illegal with a threat of jail terms involved. Now, I wrote that on X. Some people interpreted that as me saying that all parties are going to be banned. I don't think that's how this is going to work out, right? There are some checks and balances in our legal system that make it very unlikely that the government would get away with banning all opposition parties. But two things to say about that. One is, why are we even having a conversation about, oh, don't worry, we have a check and balance so that the government isn't going to ban all their opponent parties? Why are we even walking down that path? Right? The fact that we're relying on a checks and balances from the legal system, why are we giving the government that power, or attempting to give them that power in the first place? So that's the first thing, right? I mean, taking a couple of steps down these dangerous paths, thinking, oh, well, we're not at the end of the dangerous path yet. I mean, history is littered with examples of governments thinking they can take 2 steps down a dangerous path and not hit danger. And history is littered with examples of those governments running into danger, or those governments potentially taking complete power and the people running into danger. So it's not worth going down that path. But also, even if we're not going down that sort of extreme scenario yet, clearly this could be used to just trim which political parties are out there. And I mean, I don't think anyone doubts that one of the goals of this legislation was to shut down the National Socialist Network and their associated political party, the White Australia Party. Right? So a lot of people are going to find those groups distasteful. That's not really the point, right? I mean, if we're getting rid of every political party I find distasteful, I'm basically getting rid of either all of them or all of them except one. But I mean, that's not the criteria to allow political parties to exist, whether you find them distasteful. And it might seem ridiculous to say that the government is going to ban all the other parties, but it's quite easy to believe that they're going to target the one that they think is the worst, build up a case for why they are hateful, and ban that one. And once that's done, it doesn't take too much imagination to think, well, what happens in 3 or 4 years' time? Some people from that party will have joined another party, and then that might be one that's 10% less hateful, but then ASIO and the relevant minister and the AG will get together and look at that party and go, well, look, I found something that I think is a bit hateful there. So the next one gone, the next one gone. So it is the freedom of speech angle, the freedom of association angle. And then, of course, we have the issue here that in this omnibus bill, they're just going after shooters, law-abiding shooters. So which seems it doesn't really have much to do with the freedom of speech or freedom of association, except that Labor has concluded that they might be able to wedge the coalition. This is pure politics, right? This is just wedging the opposition. They could split it up into 2 different bills very easily. But if they put it together, they hope they could wedge the opposition. And so all of that's being put together. But I said at the beginning of this little part of the rant, remember the context here. Anti-speech laws, anti-association laws, gun laws, all being done in response to an ISIS-linked Muslim terrorist in Sydney shooting up a Hanukkah party. I mean, if you look at the cause for this and you look at the actions, like an ISIS attack on a Jewish group, oh, I know, what we need to do is go after law-abiding Australian shooters, decrease the amount of free speech, and shut down freedom of association. The two things aren't linked. I mean, if you want to go after that problem, go after that problem. This is an issue of we have imported a foreign ethnic hatred between 2 foreign groups into this country. And if that is a problem, and I think it is, we need to be honest about that problem. But that's not what we're going after. We're going after, I mean, does anybody seriously think that the problem of social tensions between Muslims and Jews in this country has been caused because Australia suffers under the terrible burden of too much free speech? And if we could just solve the problem of too much free speech, we will have fixed ethnic tensions across the Middle East, perhaps. I mean, it is a solution that is unrelated to the problem that motivated the solution. And I say solution, in inverted commas here, because each part of this false solution, the attack on free speech, the attack on freedom of association, and the attack on shooters, none of it is actually going to solve anything. Indeed, it's going to step us back, and it steps us back in a whole series of ways. And firstly, the gun laws are mostly just about cynically going after innocent shooters because they are not a popular group. Now, I love the shooters. They might feel offended that I'm saying this. I'm not saying you shouldn't be popular shooters. I'm just saying that in the city, you can win a vote by saying, got to grab those guns. So just politically, cynically, that's an easy thing to say. You just go after an unpopular minority. Now, of course, the left always likes to say they support minorities. They don't really mean that, right? They support the popular minorities, but unpopular minorities like shooters or smokers, they will go after with all guns ablazing. And so that's just a cynical attack that's going to hurt shooters and achieve nothing. And most people who've looked into that topic understand that. And look, the freedom of association, that's just a dangerous path to say. It's not a commonly dwelt on freedom, but in my opinion, freedom of association is almost, if not as important as freedom of speech, as a fundamental core building block of a free society. To be able to choose who you do and don't associate with is the core of what allows you to build meaningful and lasting communities, which is kind of what life's about. But that aside, and then of course the other one, going after free speech, it won't decrease tensions, it'll just turn them underground. And at this point, they insert the cliche arguments for why free speach actually matters. And
I don't think they're cliche arguments, John. I was
about to say they're very important.
First principles. Why does it matter?
Yeah, well, I was going to say, I know it sounds like I'm not taking it seriously, but I am taking it seriously. I want to frame it like this. It's one part of the story is you can't have a proper functioning democracy without people being able to speak freely. But I'd go, it's a bit more fundamental than that. You can't live a proper life without being able to think freely. Now, people could say, oh, but we're talking about free speech, not free thinking. I don't think you can disentangle the two. Proper thinking is a Bayesian process. It's you put something out there, you get feedback, you adjust it. You are constantly going through this feedback loop with ideas being put back into the world and bouncing back to you. And that's how thinking works. And also, by the way, the act of speaking is often a part of the process of thinking. I mean, even in this conversation right now, Jane, you and I don't have notes. It is through the act of actually getting together and talking that we are doing some of our thinking. This is a thinking process that we are engaging in. So firstly, speaking is part of the thinking process. Secondly, the speaking and the feedback. So the speaking out into the world and getting critical feedback and getting support and criticisms and disproof and support. That's what makes thinking work properly. And if you can only think in your head on your own, trapped in a room, that is it's a retarded thinking process. And I don't mean that as like the slur. I mean, as in it is a thinking process that is being held back. It's being retarded in the technical sense. And so you can't have a proper life, a proper free life without being able to think. And that thinking requires being able to say what you think. And crucially, another side of this that a lot of people don't dwell on, free speech isn't just about your right to speak. It's about your right to hear what other people want to speak. Right? You are being denied the right to hear all of the information that might be valuable to you, it might be important to you, it might be true, it might be entertaining, it might be funny, it might be anything. You don't have to believe it. But the government is taking away your right to hear it when it goes after free speech. So I would say that that's the ability to think properly and freely, and your ability to actually hear other people are two core parts of it. And of course, and I went over it very quickly, but without proper free speech, democracy is being bastardized, right? So, I mean, people have to be able to hear what everyone thinks and what everyone is putting on the table so that you can then choose between those options. And if you are kind of hiding some of the options, then how can people actually be voting properly? So you have kind of a demented democracy as well under that system. But what have I missed there, Gene? There's lots of arguments for free speech. I'm sure a few more.
Oh, well, I mean, it's a foundational value of our civilization, isn't it? I mean, you can't imagine the emergence of the modern world without a commitment to free speech or a belief in rationalism, against established authority, the ideals of Voltaire. I mean, when I was in high school, I mean, I think we've forgotten this. But when I was in high school, we all understood that, and apparently Voltaire never wrote this, but everyone attributed it to Voltaire, that if you're having an argument, I disagree totally with what you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it. And we all understood that because, you're in high school. We'd all say we'd be making all sorts of wacky arguments from time to time. And we all recognize that free speech was an important value of our civilization. And so it's a fundamental principle, and it should not, there are some limits. You can't shout fire in a crowded theatre, according to the famous Supreme Court judgment. There are laws against incitement to violence. If you're inciting violence against someone and there's a genuine threat.
I'm going to be absolute free speech absolutist here.
Okay.
Back on some of these. Firstly, there is most certainly legal to shout fire in a crowded theatre if there's a fire. So
true.
But more to the point, the private theatre is private property. Private properties have rules. One of those rules is going to be you can't create a fake stampede. You can't lie to create a stampede. You don't actually need any speech restriction to address that hypothetical. Right? So that's not actually, you don't need any speech restriction to fix that. You just need to enforce private property, and private property can have rules on it. And if you break those private property rules, you've trespassed. We've already got rules for that. You don't need anything. We don't need to start going down the path of starting to restrict speech because we found one little edge case. The edge case is already covered by existing laws. And I got to say, the track record of the government is once you start giving them ideas of how to ban this and ban that and ban this, they don't stop. So I'm gonna push back right at the beginning. Right?
So you're a free speech absolutist. I've been willing to allow some slight restrictions, but nowhere. I'm definitely not supportive of what is being proposed here. I just think that is definitely a slippery slope. That is going to have a chilling effect on free speech. You've already got people like Isaac Butterfield and Drew Pavlo. They're worried, is the government going to lock me up, or do I have to worry about what I'm saying? Even if you don't agree with what Drew or what Isaac Butterfield are saying sometimes, you still have to respect their right to say it. So I think this could definitely have a chilling effect on free speech, and it'll be like the UK where you got the police knocking on your door over a Facebook post or a Twitter tweet. It's just madness.
Yes, I agree. I think going back to what people forgot about when we grew up, that fake Voltaire quote. When you mentioned that, it's kind of what made the West the West, what made the Enlightenment the Enlightenment. A key part of that was the word tolerance. And the word tolerance is often misunderstood because it's been misappropriated by people today who are not tolerant. It's now in the sort of LBGT alphabet groups and all of this sort of multiculturalism world, it's been framed to mean you must fully embrace everything that's different to you. That is the exact opposite of what it means. Tolerance means you fully reject something, but you allow it anyway. You will accept the existence of something that you think is a total error, could be a total abomination. Tolerance does not mean you stop thinking it's an error. You stop thinking it's an abomination. It means you could think it's the most horrible, terrible thing in the world, but you won't start a fight or a war over it. That's what tolerance means. That's what actual tolerance means, as opposed to acceptance and celebration. And the modern tolerance movement just means acceptance and celebration. And that isn't a good idea. And because they've tied the two, they've given the word tolerance a bad name. But tolerance is, I think, one of the core things that made the West the West. And what that involved was, in key part, tolerance of error. And this is where free speech came from, allowing people to speak, because you've never had to convince people to allow others to say what you agree with. That's not what free speech is about. People say, look, I agree with free speech, but not if you're saying XXX. You're missing the point of the concept of free speech.
Yeah.
It only applies when you disagree with it, right? Even in Soviet Russia, people were always free to agree with Stalin. But that's not a freedom, right? That's not a freedom. Of course, you're allowed to agree with Stalin. Was there tolerance for disagreeing with Stalin? That's the relevant question. And that's the same question with speech. Is there tolerance for disagreeing with what someone's saying, even if they're saying something quite heterodox, even if it is just wrong? Right? Can you tolerate the existence of someone else being wrong? And by the way, a lot of this stuff kicked off. I think Chris Berg wrote quite a good book on freedom of speech, and he points out that in this Enlightenment world, it all started with tolerance. It actually started mostly with tolerance of religion, specifically the Catholic Protestant wars, and people saying, "Well, that is in error." And that's like, we think someone's in error today. You're talking about race or nationality, and if someone says something about some Indians or Scotsmen or whoever else you're going to say something about, and people will think, I think that's an error. All right, you think that's an error. Religious wars, it goes to their soul. They think you're going to burn in hell forever. They think the truth is coming from God himself. They definitely thought that was an error. And to their mind, it's a much bigger error than getting something wrong about the culture of Scotland or India, right? So that was a huge error, and they went to war for years, right? The 30-Year War, you can try to guess how many years it lasted for, but it lasted for quite a while. It was a massive error, and eventually people thought, you know what? Tolerance of error is a better way forward than constantly burying our children. And I think that was the right conclusion. And from that came this appreciation of tolerating error can actually create a freer and better society. You don't have to live with the error. You don't have to invite those people into your house, but tolerating other people thinking something dramatically different to you can lead to the modern Western enlightened world until we have started destroying it over the last, say, 50 years. So thoughts on that?
Oh, I absolutely agree with you, John. And I mean, one other thing I would say is that, I mean, maybe Australians are, or I guess I think these are very unpopular laws. I think the government's it's really stuffed up here, and now you've got the Greens pushing back on them. So look, I mean, it looks like they might have to go back to the drawing board, which is good. Let's hope. But what I would say is I think we've got to think about there are actually authoritarian countries out there. And I mean, I think you've visited more than I have, but I've visited at least, I'd say I've visited one or two. And I mean, there is a chilling effect on speech in those countries. There are things you can't say. You can't criticize the regime because otherwise you'll have the state security people, asking questions or making your life uncomfortable. And this is something that is going to hold up reform, and it can, keep these places under an authoritarian regime and hold back economic and social progress. So free speech is absolutely essential for having being in a country you want to live in and one that's going to be prosperous.
Yes, and the issue of having to try to second guess what it is you're supposed to be saying to be able to get ahead, because there's, as you say, lots of small little consequences from this. It's easy for people's minds to go straight to the most dramatic conclusions, and they are possible, so it's worthwhile thinking about them. But to some degree, there's a lot more small little mundane problems that come from setting up a society where the way to get ahead is to predict the popular zeitgeist and echo it loyally. I'd say that again if I remember what I said. It is dangerous to set up a system where the best way to get ahead is to be able to predict the dominant narrative, the dominant zeitgeist. And if you can loyally parrot it, you'll work your way up the pecking order. Not if you can sort of find a problem in it and improve it, which is the way science was supposed to work, right? Disproof, disconfirmation. Right? The reason peer review used to exist is you would send your ideas out to someone who had an incentive to prove you wrong. And if they couldn't prove you wrong, all right, maybe you have something to say. The goal was to find disproofs. But if you've got a system where the goal is to predictably guess the correct quote unquote zeitgeist, you're going to just create an entirely different internal dynamic. You're not going to have good feedback mechanisms. And at the dramatic level, you got situations like they had in a lot of totalitarian countries, where people were trying to predict what it was other people wanted to hear. So during the Great Leap Forward, of course, Mao came up with a great idea to help get China to catch up with the industrial output of America in like fast forward, right? Not have to go through a development process, just, a couple of years and go, we're as rich as America, well done. And so they put together a process which literally resulted in more human death than anything else that has ever been on Earth. Right, ever. I mean, if you go through the death stats and Hitler's bad or Stalin's worse, well, Mao's worse. Everyone knows Mao's worse. Why and how? Most of the people who died under Mao was because of this attempt at the Great Leap Forward. Right, the Cultural Revolution was devastating, but it only, quote unquote, killed a few million people. The Great Leap Forward had nothing to do with trying to kill anyone, but killed 40 to 60 million people. And because it was a ridiculous economic system, spoiler, socialism doesn't work. But part of the problem was each one of those areas was trying to work out what it was they were supposed to be saying. How much food do you have? Oh, I'm supposed to say 60? Oh, we have 60. You don't have 60, brother. There's not enough food. Those people are dying. And it was a system where you weren't being rewarded for finding the truth and reporting the truth, but for trying to find out what you're supposed to say and saying what you're supposed to say. And if you said it well, you got promoted, but it wasn't good for everyone else. It wasn't good for the development of you or the people around you, or ideas or thought or anything else in your nation. So, and that's, again, I said it's not all a big story, but there's lots of little stories, and then I gave quite a big story. But there's lots of little cases there where you go into the bureaucracy in Canberra, and the way to get ahead would be to work out what's sort of the right opinion to have on this topic at this dinner party. And that will be the better way to get ahead, rather than sort of speaking freely and going forth into the debate without care or abandon, or maybe with some care and abandon. But on the wrong track?
Oh no, I think I'm fully, I'm totally in agreement, John. I think you're right on the right track. I would say that the government, it's trying to do the right thing, isn't it? I mean, you may argue it's come to in terms of it's worried about anti-Semitism, and so there's certainly a concern about that in the community. I think they're right to be concerned about that, but I mean the risk is this is not the right way to go about combating that. And Peter Curti, my colleague at Centre for Independent Studies, he had a great op-ed in the Australian Financial Review saying, look, we've already got laws or statutes on the books, and see, why don't you try and enforce those, or see what you can do with those to crack down, rather than introduce new laws that that run the risk of overreach and chilling speech. So I mean, I think Peter's made a lot of good points, but I would say that I think the government's it's come to this because, I mean, they are legitimately concerned. I mean, you think they're doing this to wedge the opposition? Maybe. I mean, the opposition hasn't. I mean, Susan Lee hasn't she hasn't really played this very well, because weren't they pushing for the government to do something rapidly to actually legislate? I mean, they were pushing for this, and now suddenly they're, I mean, rightly. I mean, Canavan came out, Canavan's very principled, full credit to him. We've got Andrew Hastie who's come out, and now the opposition, Susan Lee, is saying, okay, we're going to oppose it. Well, but I think people are wondering, well, hang on, weren't you pushing for this? I'm not sure where she's coming from.
Yeah, when I was saying wedge the opposition, I meant by bundling together the hate speech laws with the gun laws, which there's no obvious need for those two to be in the same omnibus bill. But also, I think Labor is reacting now kind of panicked because they fear that they're getting hammered from the right by the Liberals saying you got to stop anti-Semitism, and the left, because a big chunk of their left now is very sympathetic to Muslim and Palestinian concerns, which is a tricky path for them to walk right at the moment while tensions are high. So I think they're kind of reacting a bit to the politics of that. Look, you give them a bit more credit than I do. I mean, if they were genuinely worried about social tensions, how come the topic isn't the broader one of how many Muslim Jewish conflicts did Australia have in the 1940s inside our country, or the 1960s, or the 1980s?
Well, none, as far as I understand.
What changed? I mean, if we look at those social tensions, we have imported, I mean, the Israel-Palestine conflict, which I have lots of opinions about, but put that aside, it's not happening in Australia. It is an intellectual exercise for Australians looking overseas saying, well, this is wrong, well, this is right, this is what I would do. We're not involved. It certainly seems like we're involved. How did that happen? So if they are genuinely looking at this and thinking, oh, I care about this and I want to find a solution, why the hell isn't the first, second, and third topic a consideration of our immigration and multiculturalism policies? Or at least, why isn't it on the table? Why is it one of the topics? So they see this issue, it blows up, and they think, oh, quickly, I got to do something, or I can't do anything that actually addresses the issue. So let's go after Australians' free speech. Let's undermine freedom of association. Let's take away gun rights. And I got to say, I think it is quite cynical across the board. These are things they all wanted to do anyway. Let's be honest. I mean, the Labor and the Greens were already wanted stronger hate speech laws. They would already like to break up, freedom of association that they think is wrong. And they already wanted tougher gun laws. And then something totally unrelated to those three things happen. And they go, quickly, everyone, moral panic, bundle them together, rush them through Parliament in less than a week.
But I'd say cynical. It's not. I'd probably be more. Look, I think they missed the rise of anti-Semitism. There's no doubt about that. But they're being pushed to do this. I mean, the opposition. I mean, Susan Lee was telling them to do something. You've got the Australian Council of Jury, I think, is supportive of these laws, isn't it? Or one of the Jewish bodies. Allegra Spender's very vocal on it. So it's not just, I don't think it is just a Labor plot to suppress our civil liberties. I think they're reacting to what's going on, and they think this is the best thing to do now. I mean, clearly they missed the rise of anti-Semitism. They're trying to do something, but it's not really a great solution. So that's all I'd say on that matter at the moment.
Yeah, look, I agree that Liberals are, I think, going down a dangerous path here, where they've suddenly forgotten all of their previous concerns about hate speech laws, because apparently there is one and only one ethnic group for which they suddenly support hate speech laws, which I think is going to be counterproductive across the board, right? I mean, I don't think that's going to end up being a good thing for Jewish groups. If the world looks at this and thinks, oh, we're against hate speech laws in every other instance for every other race, but wait, there's one special ethnicity. I don't think you want to be carving yourself out as this special ethnicity like that. I think that's a dangerous place to position your ethnic community. So I think the Liberals and some of those Jewish groups are making a mistake on that front as well. But look, it was true that Labor already wanted these laws. And when they looked to put in laws, they didn't do anything that actually would address, how is it that Australia has imported the Muslim-Jewish crisis? I mean, if you say they were late to pick up on it, all right, they're picking up on it now. So where is the Royal Commission into Immigration and Multiculturalism? Because they picked up on it now, right? Well, no, they're not going to look at the issue. They're going to go back and do something that they already wanted to do, which is introduce tougher hate speech laws.
Well, I mean, it should be part of a Royal Commission, shouldn't it? They should have, as part of their terms of reference. I mean, look, I honestly haven't looked at, I should look at the terms of reference to make sure I understand what I'm saying, but I understand that that's not part of the terms of reference. Is that right, John? They're not looking at social cohesion and what, I mean, because clearly yeah, go ahead.
They'll be looking at social cohesion, but I very much doubt that they will be looking at it in the way I've been discussing it here, where it could be related to importing foreign conflicts. I think Chris Minns accidentally summed this up very, I don't know if I want to say very well, but very tellingly, where he says, of course, Australia can't have freedom of speech. We have multiculturalism. And that was like a mic drop moment. It's
I saw
like,
that. Yes.
Do you know what you said? He came back and said it again later. So he's saying it on purpose. I mean, I thought he just misspoke to start with. But he's basically saying, and I think this is Labor's position writ large, and look, I think this is a position of a lot of Liberals, is you can't have free speech. You can't have a free society and multiculturalism. And multiculturalism is so important that we have to get together and just sort of take away the free speech in a free society. And look, if they are right that these two things are in conflict, then let's put that up for vote. Let's put that up for a decision. And if I'm asked to choose between free speech and multiculturalism, I'm choosing free speech every day and twice on Sundays. Right. So, but I mean, this just seems to be assumed that, oh, well, you have to sacrifice free speech. We won't even consider multiculturalism. It's not even part of the terms of reference. It's a constant. Right. Our free speech is a variable. You can turn that up or down, or always down, actually, according to the political whims. But worshipping at the altar of multiculturalism, that is a constant that has to be there. And by the way, I wonder if the things I'm saying in this conversation right now could be illegal in a week's time.
Well, I mean, I think this is where there are concerns about this current law, this proposed law, John. Look, the reality is we are now an ethnically diverse country, and we need to figure out how we go forward and create a socially cohesive country. I mean, it's ethnically diverse, that things are vastly different compared with when 30 or 40 years ago when we were growing up. So I mean, we've got to find a way through this, but the thing is, we can't sacrifice free speech because it is a foundational value. I mean, we need to just be completely principled about that. And yeah, I don't agree with Chris Minns on that whatsoever. And I don't know what evidence he'd be able to advance to support it. Yeah.
Well, you don't agree with him in terms that there's an inherent conflict?
Well, I mean, I don't think it's necessarily inherent. I think you're right. We've imported these foreign conflicts, but we don't have to. I mean, we need to, I don't know whether it's education or people need to wake up. We need to be rational about these things, and we need to find a way to live together because we are all on this continent together, okay? I mean, we can't, it's an ethnically diverse society now, so we've got to find a way where we all respect each other, and we have free speech as an important principle, but we're not carrying on conflicts from around the world. We've just got to make that clear that we're not going to have that. I mean, honestly, John, I don't know how we do it. This is where we need leadership from people like Chris Minns and from Albanese. But look, my starting point would be we don't sacrifice free speech. I mean, I think we need that as a foundational principle because of the reasons you've been advancing. We all benefit from it. We can't live in a society where we can't criticize the government, or we can't, make our views heard. We're just not going to be able to live like that. So I think it's essential. I don't think they're inherently in conflict. I think multiculturalism, as we understood it back in the 80s or the 90s, I think that seems to have failed in Australia. There's no doubt about that. I mean, because we have imported these conflicts, but I think we can be ethnically diverse and have a belief in fundamental principles like free speech. I don't see them as inherently in conflict.
Yeah, well, it might be worth having a whole topic on this. It's because we're getting up to the hour mark, but I do think it's a huge topic. It's an interesting topic, and it's one that is plagued with definitional issues. Like, often people, when they're talking about multiculturalism, will have in their minds two different things, and they're both insisting, no, it's wonderful, no, it's terrible, and they both are imagining two different things in their minds, right? So I think it is possible to have a bunch of people who look different from each other in a country and not be pursuing multiculturalist policies. And I do think multiculturalist policies, so the policies that actually prop up ethnic differences, that encourage a lack of assimilation, I think those policies will end up being inherently hostile to free speech. I think Chris Minns is probably correct in noticing that dichotomy. And if that's the path they want to go, where they insist on propping up ethnic differences, highlighting ethnic differences, playing up those differences, and sort of discouraging assimilation, if that's the path they want to go down, then perhaps they do need to wind back free speech. I just think free speech is, firstly, just too important for that, right? So you have to be willing to give up on that weird project if it's going to violate free speech. Although I also just think that weird project is just an inherently bad project in and of itself, right? You go into a country, you assimilate to it to some degree. When I go to your house, I adjust myself a little bit to the rules of your house. I have friends, when you go to their house, they take their shoes off. I don't walk in there and go, no, I'm coming to your house, but I'm bringing keeping my shoe on rule. I mean, you adjust to the places where you get invited to. So I do think that to some degree of natural assimilation is a natural, good and healthy thing, and propping up the absence of that is a dangerous policy path in and of itself, and it undermines free speech. But look, that's a big topic, and I can understand why people would argue with it. And I think it's very reasonable and fun arguments to be had there. Although I've got to say, those arguments need to be legal if we're going to have them. And sometimes when having these conversations, we're going to have to walk up to topics that can be sensitive, that can be heterodox, that can be rude, that could offend, and they might be wrong. And we'll discover that as we talk about them. But first, we have to be able to talk about them. Look, we're running out of time, but I wanted to run through two extra things quickly. We had penciled down here, by the way, if we had spare time, let's talk about all the coming wars and all the US military adventurism. I think it's safe to say we don't have time for that now, but we'll circle back to that one as well. So we got that one and multiculturalism on the cards for the future. But just to round out a couple more points on this free speech topic, I wanted to, if I can make it work. Is that working? Yeah, there we go. Just put in context these speech laws, because these aren't the first anti-speech laws we've had, and it's worthwhile having a little look at what we've got. So as I said before, 18C came in 1995. Then Howard attempted to start regulating the internet in 99. It didn't work. Then Howard introduced these laws against inciting violence. Now, these seem quite sensible. Why would you not want to have inciting violence be illegal? It was already basically illegal to get together and beat up a group. This was just, it introduced the idea of saying race, religion, and nationality. But again, this wasn't really an infringement on freedom of speech. This is just the edge. You start introducing the edge cases. Now, 2012, Gillard attempted to massively expand 18C, but she was stopped. So, alhamdulillah there. And then 2015, Abbott and Turnbull introduced the E-Safety Commissioner. But in this stage, the E-Safety Commissioner could only protect children, so it was a much watered-down role. But again, the thin edge of the wedge. All of these things start pretty benign sounding, right? The Racial Discrimination Act was pretty benign sounding. Then we got 18C. Howard introduced some censorship early on. It was fairly benign, but then it ramped up. There's laws against inciting violence, started benign. As we'll see later, it ramps up. Abbott and Turnbull introduced an E-Safety Commissioner only for the kids. Got to think about the kids, but as we'll see soon, it ramps up. Turnbull introduces criminal penalties against speech that can interfere with national security, or just allows ASIO to arrest any of us if they can come up with a good enough story. Morrison, of course, makes it illegal to share things on the internet that have too much violence. Of course, not like anyone watches violence on the television. And then you see here, this is recent years. Starting in 2021, this has really ramped up. The last 5 years, we had all of these up until then. And then, in the last 5 years, Morrison, Albanese. It has really ramped up here, right? Starting here with Morrison expands the E-Safety Commissioner so that they're not just parenting children, they're also parenting the adults, which was a massive mistake by the Morrison government, and we're still suffering under that internet censorship regime. Albanese bans hate symbols. Albanese attempts to just ban any information the government thinks is wrong, but thankfully they were defeated on that, the misinformation bill. Albanese, they say they ban the under 16s. What that's mostly about is forcing everyone else to prove their age to use the internet. And then last year, Albanese took this inciting violence, which seems like, of course, you don't want to allow inciting violence, but they've tweaked it now so that it could be recklessly inciting violence, which is, saying something that you didn't mean to incite violence, but you spoke in such a silly way that you accidentally incited violence. So now with all of these ideas, many of them started benignly with just an edge case. It was hard to argue against. And nearly all of them rolled forward. And now 2026, we've got basically Albanese attempting to turn 18C into a criminal matter. And what next? And the thing to notice about this, and I wasn't skipping legislation that went the opposite direction. There was no legislation that ever went the opposite direction, right? The boffins in Canberra, the people that sort of lead our academia and media and bureaucracy, who think themselves so smart, they always think they're being so nuanced and carefully balancing two things. They're carefully balancing free speech with people's emotions or whatever they think they're balancing. How could it be if they're carefully balancing something, their conclusion always comes down the same side? The balance between free speech and hurt feelings has come down 100% with bureaucrats caring about hurt feelings, 0% of any politician, academic, media, or bureaucratic elite saying, you know what, we need to balance this with a bit of free speech. This is not a balancing process they're going through. I mean, even if when we're going through, though, you're thinking, oh, that one's reasonable, or that one maybe not, or that one's a bit reasonable. All right, okay. You're being a reasonable person there. But ask yourself, why is it that every single one goes the same direction? We are on a one-way ratchet, right? You take the step to the left, then you pause. You can't go right. You can't go right. Another step to the left. You can't go right. It's a one-way ratchet, only going one way. And your reasonableness is being used against you. You've got to draw a line, call bullshit, and say, just stop doing this. Stop doing this. And having said that, I just want to... I will at the end go to say, stop doing this. What is the politics of the situation? What is the current state of this legislation? But before I do that, Gene, do you have anything to say on that little post of the quick history since 1995 of anti-speech legislation in Australia?
Yeah, I found that quite revealing, John. I didn't realise there was so much of it. And I think it's something that, yeah, maybe it has. We haven't been paying enough attention. I mean, we've taken freedom of speech for granted, but I mean now, because of the circumstances, because of just how quickly this is all happening, and because people are speaking out, more people than I think maybe have in the past, we are starting to notice and to say, yeah, this is not right, and we really do need to worry about this. So I was surprised by just how much how many restrictions there have been,
and how many of them have really cascaded in more recent history. I mean, the fact
that's because of the
95.
Well, that's because of the change in social attitudes, isn't it? So, I mean, I don't know what's driving. I mean, the millennials and now the Gen Zs are perhaps more concerned about being offended, or they want to be, what's the word? They're concerned about not offending others than previous generations, and you have to be create safe spaces. So there's been that general societal change, and I saw Tim Andrews in the comments. Tim's wife Helen has an interesting hypothesis on that she spoke to the trigonometry lads about the other day. So I thought that was interesting. Obviously still has to be tested, but I mean, Helen's hypothesis was that this is related to growing, larger numbers or of women in the workforce and in academia, and sort of going away from a once more aggressive or more not blokey, what's the right word, but more combative male culture to one where there's more of the feminine caring values in there. So look, I don't know whether that's part of it. I thought it was an interesting hypothesis. I don't know if you saw Helen's interview there.
I did. I was actually about to raise it myself. I was going to frame it as the increase in the feminine attitudes. Because I mean, the feminine attitudes can be brought by a lot of sort of low T guys these days as well, low testosterone men. But I think this attitude of prizing caring over sort of autistic accuracy. And I word it that way to sort of word it in a way where the female trait is positive, because this isn't an issue of women are bad, men are good. This is an issue of different traits. Caring is fundamental to a society. You are not going to be bringing up a well-rounded next generation without a bunch of caring mums and teachers out there and carers. So caring is not a bad trait, but there are some endeavors where caring is very much needed, and autistic accuracy is not as helpful. Like trying to scold your 3-year-old because they're not technically correct might not be the best way to bring up a 3-year-old. But, trying to be as caring as possible about the feelings for the engineer that's building a bridge is the wrong way to build a bridge. I'll just to use, dramatic examples. And I think what Helen's getting at there is this sudden increase in the caring focus in endeavors that used to be more focused on sort of brutalist accuracy. And I think that can take some of those endeavors into strange directions. And I would add, especially if some of those female attitudes, those caring attitudes, comes from people who don't have their own children to care about. But maybe I'm being a bit too snarky when I say that. But yes, that's there was an interesting thesis by Helen, and something worth looking at. The other one to look out for people who have enough spare time to be reading more books is check out The Coddling of the American Mind by Jonathan Haidt and Greg Lukianoff, which sort of goes through a bit of the history of potentially how these coddled generations have become so emotionally fragile. And they've been brought up in a world where their childhood gets extended later and later. Instead of just, go out and play in traffic by the age of 10, they've got at the age of 20, do you need a cuddle because somebody sort of bumped into you? And that's creating a whole generation of people that perhaps haven't learned to take the stings and arrows of outrageous fortune. So the last thing that I wanted to get to was, what is the political situation here? And here we've got a little bit of good news. Tentative good news. So in the last couple of days, when this kicked off, and this has been a great testament to, I got to say, Elon Musk, right? So X has been a big place where this has really kicked off and created a buzz and excitement, and then it's, I think, bubbled out from there. And when it started, Labor wanted to push through something, and they said, we've got the backing of everyone. Everyone wants this. We're ramming it through. I think they thought it was going to be super popular. The Liberals kind of had their tail between their legs. They assume the Greens are going to back it because it takes away freedoms, and they assume Liberals are going to back it because they've got no backbone. And to start with, One Nation was silent. And there was, and we were given less than a week to try and get a crossover for all of this legislation before it was going to be law. And in the last couple of days, there was this bubbling up of opposition, and it started quite small. I put out quite early on a request for politicians who have come out against this. And to start with, it was a very small list. And the people who were doing it were, I got to say, quite brave. And one of the things that we do not have enough of in this country is political bravery. Right? It's one of the most important missing features of a functional political system in our country. And so kudos to the people who came out early on this issue. Ralph Babette, as usual, just doesn't give a shit, says anything. So he came out early and was right. Alex Antic, once again. And then a few people were putting their hands up. These are kind of the usual suspects who are like if it's going to be, if the vote's going to be 70-6 in the Senate, these are the people you could normally look to hopefully be those couple of decent people. But then something interesting happened. Andrew Hastie came out. And that kind of changes things, because this is no longer just a couple of dissidents in the back room, your Matt Canavans and Alex Antics. This is now a factional leader inside the Liberals. And then there was, I think, enough furor in the online sort of minor right. The Libertarian Party came out quite strongly. Craig Kelly came out strongly. George Christensen came out strongly. Jared Rennick came out strongly. And One Nation was silent for a few days, but then they came out swinging, and they said, no, we're going to oppose this as well. And we started to get a little bit of a roll on where all of the minor right, plus One Nation, plus the hasty wing of the Liberal Party were all starting to make noise. And then I also saw, this hasn't been noticed as much, but Tim Wilson, nominally from the moderate wing of the Liberal Party, also came out. It's worded quite differently to how the Conservative wing words it. But reading between the lines, he was very skeptical of these laws as well. And it started to look like the sort of the pressure of the hasty wing plus One Nation plus the minor right was going to give the Liberals sort of cover or an excuse or an incentive to find a way to say no. And it looks like as of today, so this is what we put out, the Australian Taxpayers Alliance, taxpayers.org.au. Go there, check out what we're doing, join if you want. But what I was putting out for ATA yesterday and then into this morning was that this is the steps we've got to do. We've got to get the Liberals over the line to oppose this. We can't stop this legislation without at least getting the coalition to oppose it. Because if Liberal and Labor gets together, anything passes. Doesn't matter what anyone else thinks. And so today, it looks like the opposition isn't going to be supporting this legislation. So that's a good piece of news. And then Labor could have then turned to the Greens. But it looks like the Greens aren't going to be supporting this version of the legislation. So that is a little victory for today. Now, we'll see. A day is a long time in politics. The Greens are probably going to be in negotiations with Labor to try and make the legislation worse, and then they can come up with an even greater monstrosity and sneak it through the Senate by 1 or 2 votes. So there are risks. But we have a little victory today. So let's just, 2 cheers for this morning.
Yeah, but what if we assume they're coming from a good place? Because they may see that it's a left or like a right. I don't think the right, it should not just be the right who are against these laws. The left should realise these laws could be weaponised against them. And this is a point Matt Canavan alluded to in his op-ed today, I think it was in the Courier Mail, where he's saying, look back to when the Menzies government tried to ban the Communist Party, right? So if you look historically, it was a Conservative government that was trying to ban a left-wing organisation. So these laws could certainly be weaponised against the left, and maybe the Greens realise this, and So look, I'd like to think that they're coming from the right place, and credit to them for having that position.
Yeah, perhaps I worded it as cynically as I could. I'd say 2 things on that. One is I do think there are schisms within the Greens. The Greens aren't all one group. So there's been 2 comments that have come out of the Greens. One that I think is a useful instinct, and the other one really isn't. So their complaints of this current legislation, one of their complaints is that we want all of this hate speech laws to apply to not just race and nationality, but also sex, sexuality, gender identity, disability, whether you have a headache, the color of your hair, what this shoe size, and all the rest of these attributes that you need to be very carefully protected. Now, that I think is just an entirely insidious and negative attitude that will only make the world worse. So I've got no time for that. And they're saying, oh, well, they want to hold up this legislation because they want to make sure it applies to everyone. So that's just dangerous, right? And Labor has kind of half given in, saying, all right, just help us pass these hate laws, hate speech laws, anti-speech laws. And if you help us pass these, then later we'll come and we'll pass even more anti-speech laws, which that is a worrying dynamic, right? If that's how they get together, if the Labor and Greens form that sort of compromise, that is a worrying dynamic. But there is one other concern amongst the Greens, and that is they are concerned that some of these anti-speech and anti-association laws could be used against Muslim groups, like groups that want to campaign for Palestine and things like that. So they are aware that once you give the government a powerful enough remit to be able to just go after hate, you are putting a lot of faith in the person who has that power to define hate. And it's occurred to them, normally the Greens are safe thinking that the bureaucratic political media academic elite interprets hate the same way they do. But there is a bit of a schism where some people interpret the Palestinian movement to be full of hate, and some people, like the Greens, consider it to be the right way forward. And I think they're worried that some thought leaders might designate Palestinians as hate groups. And so that's giving them a bit of pause. And if that's what gives them pause, if they're starting to notice, oh dear, these people with more power than me could designate me a hate group, maybe I shouldn't give that person so much power, that's a good instinct. So if we could encourage that instinct, it's unfortunate they only care about it when they're directly impacted. Right? I'd like to think this is a principle where we could care about this for people very different to yourself. But at least that instinct, hopefully, is one that could bring them to just oppose these laws. And so we should encourage. I think that's what's motivating, for instance, David Shoebridge, who is, I think, from what I've been told, one of the, and this is a low bar, but one of the less bad thinkers in the Greens.
Yeah, No, good. That was good analysis, John. I missed that. What was motivating the Greens? No, that was really helpful. One question: do you think this could violate the implied right of free political speech in the Constitution? We have an implied right or something, don't we, based on that decision, High Court decision 30 years ago?
Well, yeah, the High Court has discovered it. It's one of those examples where lawyers and judges get together and squint and they see extra words that aren't quite in the Constitution. But, God bless them, that's the system we live in. If judges squint, they get to see the Constitution that's written in invisible ink. And yes, one thing they saw written in invisible ink was the implied rights to freedom of political communication. Now, that isn't absolute, right? So that's regularly tested. And then the High Court has to come to a conclusion of, is the goal that the government's trying to do with this legislation sufficiently important and can only be done this way, that benefit supersedes the whatever infringement exists on your freedom of political communication. So it's not absolute. It has to be done by weighing it. Now, it would be tested for sure. I mean, it is definitely worth testing. Yes. I hope it would fail, right? I very much hope it would fail. We can't assume it. And we also, as I said before, we shouldn't be in a situation where we have to hope that the High Court is able to read in invisible ink something to save us from laws that could stifle our political communication. Because this law, it clearly stifles political communication.
Oh, well, it's designed to, isn't it, in a way? I mean, yeah. That's one of the intents, yeah. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think they would.
You may think it's hateful. You may not agree with that political communication that some people are making, but we have to defend to a death the right of people to say those things, right? Just to live in a free society.
Well, going back to the democratic part, if you want to keep up the pretense that we're living in a proper democracy, you have to allow people with very different ideas, including ones you hate, including ones that may just be full on hateful. You have to allow them to put up their ideas and have people vote, because that's supposed to be the democratic ideal. So it's now put aside whether we actually live in a functional democracy or whether that's a good thing. But I mean, for the people who think we're in a democracy and think it's a good thing, how can you then take away the option of some people to vote for an idea different to yours and still turn around and beat your chest and claim you believe in the virtues of democracy? So now I think chances are, I don't know, I don't want to say, because I mean, the High Court can do lots of wacky and wonderful things. It would certainly be challenged. And I think there would be some things that could be done with these laws that would cross the line and would probably be ruled unconstitutional. but they'd need to be tested first, and that's just not a situation we should be in. All right, we've hit the 1 hour 20 mark. The reason I haven't been rushing to wrap this up is we've got up to about 900 people watching, which is it's good to be able to talk to so many people, but we don't want to go too long, Gene, or we'll run out of puff ourselves. So what do you reckon we have a quick look through some of these comments, questions, and see if there's anything that we want to riff on there? Oh, could I just finish on the politics of this, by the way? So there's been a small win today. With the Liberals and Greens aren't backing the current laws. This is not over. The Greens will be communicating with Labor to see if they can come up with a compromise, and I am fearful for what that may look like. Now, if you're watching this, you're probably more on the right of politics. It's unlikely the Greens are going to take your comments to heart. But there's another part of this, which is when the opposition came out against it, they said, don't worry, we'll come up with our own evil omnibus anti-speech law. Now, they didn't frame it like that. But I'd say it is very important right now to be keeping up the pressure on the coalition. Right? I mean, there is pressure now. We've got some good people in the backbenches of the coalition who have said, no, this is just bullshit. It's got to be stopped. One Nation, slow to get off the mark. But once they got off the mark, they've been saying all the right things. They are ramping up the pressure. If One Nation was pro-free speech on this and the Liberals backed the anti-speech position, this could have been the point where that tipped them over into being the biggest conservative force in Australia, like has happened with Farage in the UK and some opinion polls show in Australia. So it was a big political moment. So One Nation's keeping up the pressure. You can keep up the pressure too, right? There's submissions closed today. No one reads the submissions anyway. A lot of people who do work in political offices, if they start seeing a lot of emails come in, especially if they're individually written, they start to notice it. They start to comment on it. They start to tell their MP. Now, it doesn't just make the MP do whatever you write in your email, but it does have a small but meaningful impact, right? So contact coalition MPs. Now, I know it's the Senate where it matters, but the MPs in the lower house, they also have a voice in the party room, right? And what we want to do is we want to increase the pressure on the party room, the Liberal and National party rooms, so that they get the message loud and clear that they just have to be against this sort of stuff. They have to stop supporting or even flirting with anti-speech laws. Right, so this is something that you can still be doing now. We've got our first win. We've got them to say they're not backing this legislation. Keep going, keep contacting. We've got up at the taxpayers.org.au. You can see up on the Defend Free Speech tab. Go and check out my my X account where I've put up there a list of all of the email addresses of all of the national politicians, all of the Liberal senators and all of the Liberal lower house members. And you can sort of pick and choose who you want to send it to. Contact them, be polite. You're going to get nowhere by just calling them idiots. You may think they're an idiot. Tell that to your husband or wife later. But when you're writing to them, just appeal to the better angels of their nature. Say, please do not sacrifice free speech for whatever it is Labor's trying to achieve here, for this false pursuit of safety, for this idea that no one will be offended, for this dream of perfect multiculturalism. Whatever you're trying to achieve, please do not sacrifice free speech on that altar. It's too important. And they need to know that that's what their base thinks, and that can make a difference. So please do that.
John, one thing I find interesting is that it's economists like you who are, some of the loudest, and Canavan's an economist too. And I mean, I think that's probably why Canavan's got good principles. And but we're the ones who are really, outraged about this and speaking up about it. Where are the lawyers in this? Like when I studied, I remember when I was a law student many years ago, we had Jeff Walker, who was professor at UQ, and he was very strong on rule of law and free speech and all of that. And he would always talk about how, like, there'd be examples in history, I think it might have been in Sri Lanka or somewhere where, it'd be or India, I can't remember exactly, but the lawyers would be the ones who would push back on government overreach because they understood the principles involved. Which are there lawyers who are pushing back against this? Do you have any prominent legal scholars on your side on this issue?
On our side, I hope, Gene.
Yeah, on our side, yes.
Jim Allen is the name that comes to mind. He's also the person who I've got the term saying that the High Court is reading things in invisible ink. I think he's quite famous for that little smart-ass quip. Look, UQ Law School used to be dominated by non-communists, which is rare because most law schools are dominated by the more communist types. I believe that's fading. I don't know how many are left, and I don't pay that much close attention to the legal academy anymore. But I think part of the issue is, and this is no lawyer is going to like it when I say this. And of course, this is an economist ripping on a lawyer. So that's the inside baseball. But I think economists look at the incentives of how things could be. Lawyers are often focused on what is. So what is it already, and then deviate from there. And what's the tweak you can do from here and the tweak you can do from there. Whereas economics, I think, teaches a framework that is more amenable to being able to go sweep all that off the table. What's the first principles? Build up from there what makes sense. And if what you build up from first principles doesn't look like the status quo, well, then you need to make bigger reforms than just tweaking the status quo. I mean, the legal mindset is very good at tweaking, very good at adjusting. And often they'll come into these laws and they'll think, oh, I'm just adjusting to find a middle ground. As I said before, their middle ground always goes one direction. But I think many of them actually think they're sitting there finding a middle ground. That's probably what's going on inside their head. Right. If you take a step back and look at the dynamic, you see something else is going on here. But I think that's the legal mentality is not the one to fight the big fights. But having said that, obviously Jim Allen is out there fighting the big fights. There have been some great legal advocates for freedom and Western civilization. But and I hope there's more of them. And if you're a lawyer watching this, get up, speak up. We need you. And then go and study economics and you'll be even better.
Sorry, I distracted you from going through the comments before. Are we still going through the comments?
Yeah, I'll have a quick look through them. I got to say, a lot of them I think were relevant to what we were talking about at the time. So it might be a bit hard for us to get back there. What's going on with the crazy bullion prices? Yeah, well, people are worried. You may have seen Trump's about to invade Greenland. And then it'd be the end of NATO, and then Russia will drop a nuke on Germany. You heard it here first.
Yeah, we talked about not Russia dropping a nuke on Germany, but we talked about the geopolitical tensions earlier as an explanation for the crazy bullion price. And I think Lyndon's noted it's not just gold, but also silver. That's right. Exactly.
I totally agree. I love the idea of more states. Us in the regions like New England need to create our own state.
Well, I think a New England, we'd have a state, wouldn't we have a state of Southeast Queensland and then Tweed and New England perhaps? Would that be a natural state? And then we have a North Queensland state? I guess you can carve up the country.
I think we should carve it up a lot smaller than most people would. But at this point, I would just take anything. Anything's better than nothing. So even if it's just Riverina and New England and North Queensland, those are the three that is where you'd start, because there is already some sort of movement and history behind those. But I mean, I think the government, the Brisbane City Council, is already one of the biggest governments or economies in Australia. I think that could be a state, but I'll take what I can get. New England's a good one. Just don't include Newcastle this time. For anyone who knows the history, it was the inclusion of Newcastle that meant the referendum on creating a New England state failed. It was included for the purpose of ensuring it failed. Hate speech is part of free speech. Yeah, I mean, that's true. I mean, hate speech is such a vacuous word. I don't think it's... I don't think it has much meaning, except for it's speech that certain groups hate. Because it doesn't have to be hateful speech. You can say things that are quite, I don't want to say them now because I'll get in trouble and you'll all think badly of me, but you can say quite racist things without any hate in your heart. That is quite possible. And you can say other things that aren't racist with a lot of hate in your heart, but people don't mean that hate speech is the hateful one. It means that that's the politically incorrect, heterodox views in the wrong way. Too far outside the Overton window, and then they call it hate speech. So maybe we should call it anti-Overton speech, because I don't think it's actually about the amount of hate you have in your heart. Campbell Newman has stated he regrets the bike laws. Well, that's the freedom of association issue. I see where that's coming from. Yeah, I mean, I can't remember the quote, but I'll take your word for it. This is a long one. This is coming from your side of things, Gene. Well, some of the new social media,
things. Sorry,
well, it's LinkedIn, right? I think it's shared.
Good. Okay.
Yeah. So this is the idea of getting social media to turn off the algorithms so that you just see things sequentially. I think some of the alternative social medias did that. Right? I think Rumble does that, the alternative to YouTube. I think Gab used to do that, the alternative to X. One of the issues there is once you get used to YouTube and X, you kind of appreciate that it finds stuff you're interested in. The problem is when they use the algorithm nefariously, but using the algorithm wisely probably makes a more enjoyable viewing experience. So it's a tricky one. Yeah, like giving people the choice is a good idea. I think they used to have that
if revealed preference, John, I mean, engagement for good or bad is much higher now than it was in the old days. I mean, the social media companies did that because it maximized engagement. It kept people on and
well, yes, I mean,
active
to some degree. To some degree, we've got network externalities where the big players kind of have this captured network. So if an up-and-comer is doing something different, the success of the big network doesn't prove what they're doing is better. It just proves they've already got the network, right? Because it's like network externalities for the people listening at home. It's when you get a benefit because people are already in your group, right? So the first person to have a fax machine, it was pretty useless, right? You're the only person with a fax machine. Who you're sending it to? Then once you had 10 people, it became more useful. The more people who got it, the more useful it became to get it. You were a part of a network. And if someone came up with like an alternative fax machine that worked differently, but they were the only person with that anti-fax machine, they couldn't talk to anyone. So even if their anti-fax machine was better, they would throw it away and buy a fax machine because that was the machine that was on the network. So that's, I don't know why I used fax machines to explain this example, but that's the network externality that already exists there, which gives them a big head start against the up-and-comers, which is why it was so helpful that Elon Musk bought X. Some people responding to what we were saying, but I don't know what exactly. I agree. Exactly. We said something right, Gene. I'm sure of it.
Okay. I think that was probably, probably more you. I think AGI had LOL at one stage for something I was saying. But anyway.
All right. To be fair, the major parties, it might have been before where you said that's where we need responsible leadership from Minns and Albanese.
Oh, yeah, I think that was it, actually. Yeah, I've just been naive here. Yes.
When you said that, I was about to click.
John, we live in hope. Yeah.
All right. So I can see the lull here. Now, where is this? To be fair, the major parties hate us with a passion. I think you overestimate how much they think about us. I don't think they're driven by hate for us. They're driven by their need to be able to do the thing that gets 50% plus one of the vote at the next federal and state election. It's much. And look, that's not even a criticism, right? Because if a major party doesn't have that as a goal, it just loses. So we've created the game. We've created the incentives. They followed their incentives. And it's not necessarily a pretty outcome, but and if they hate us with a passion, can we now prescribe them as an illegal organization and shut them down? Let's see what I've got here.
I mean, it's right.
I don't know what I was talking about there. No one can say anything about it. China and Russia have the UN.
And
I don't know. Just leave the UN. Problem solved. I fully support multi-ethnic society, yet all cultures are not equal. I got to say, I think, the language is getting overloaded here. I'm fine with there being diversity of what people look like, so racial diversity. Ethnicity, I think, part of that is having some sort of shared tradition and heritage, which is inherited, but culture. And I think you can, if immigration is slow enough, have people converge into a dominant central ethos in the country. And I think that should be the goal. And people could come in, look different, but adjust to our sort of ethnic group and within a generation or two be part of it. So I don't, because that allows for racial diversity, the Nazis will reject what I'm saying and they'll hate me and call me a cuck and what have you, and fine. And because I want people to actually assimilate in, and I recognize the existence of ethnicities, then the left will probably ban me. So I'm in no man's land. They all hate me. We have to be able to criticize Islam. Yep. We have to be able to criticize every religion and culture for that matter. And culture is very closely tied to nationality and ethnicity, which will get you in trouble soon. Tim Humphreys asks, is there a case for a free speech amendment in the Australian Bill of Rights? I would one caveat to that, I would say we should have a free speech amendment to the Australian Constitution. We don't have a Bill of Rights, and I don't think we should try to have a Bill of Rights, because once you say to people, oh, write down all the rights you want, they're going to come up with a really stupid list of rights. So also, if you try to come up with a bunch of rights, if you come up with 10, people are going to agree with 7, disagree with 3. You can have so many fights, you'll just be losing support. How about we just pick a right that we know is fundamental and important and fight for that?
Yeah.
If and when we win that, like one right's easier than 10, right? So let's just win one. If we can't win one, why are we even trying to get 10? Don't worry about that. And if we can win one, once we've got the right to free speech in our constitution, we can move on to the second one. So like one at a time, I would say. I think it is time Australia had a strong movement for put free speech in the Australian constitution. John Ruddock has pushed for that from New South Wales. Ralph Babette has pushed for that. I think a few others have as well. I think it's a good idea, but not in the Bill of Rights. Okay?
Look, I think you're right there, John. I think what matters is how the values we hold, how passionately, how fiercely we defend those values, those beliefs. Because I mean, the Americans, while they do have a Bill of Rights and they've got the First Amendment, but they believe it. They actually defend it. They understand it. It's in their DNA. I mean, we've got a Human Rights Act in Queensland, I think, but it didn't do any good during COVID, where the government just imposed all sorts of mad restrictions on us. So you can have these things on paper, and they don't mean anything if they're not core values that people understand and defend.
Yeah, I think we need to copy the American wording as well. I mean, a right has to prescribe what a state can't do. Like if a right is said, like you can have a thing, then there's always 1,000 trade-offs, and it's going to be a bunch of bureaucrats and lawyers working out how to trade it off according to their values. But if it specifically says the state shall not, now they'll probably still squint and find something written in invisible ink, but that is much harder for them to get around, right? It's explicitly you shall not, ban this or infringe that or take away our guns, or whatever it is that you're putting in that amendment. I think those sort of amendments would work better. So, look, a couple of the American articles in the Bill of Rights, amendments in the Bill of Rights, have, I think, slowed down the decay of the American political system, and very few other bills of rights have done any good at all. So maybe we just copy the American First Amendment, just Parliament instead of Congress. All right, what else have we got here? I think we're getting near to the end of this. Most lawyers are very left-wing. There's some notable exceptions, but I think the legal profession isn't one that generates sort of freedom, libertarian or conservative sympathetic values. I don't know what this says yet. Let's see if it makes sense. By the time a country is rebelling and protesting, we're going to be calling them idiots. We have to choose how much heat you put on the regime. I can't remember what that's in reference to, but everybody thinks that every system is perfectly stable until it isn't. So we see that in other countries. When other countries reach a point of instability, we can spot that much more clearly. We see these protests in Iran, and we think, could their system collapse? Could it be regime change? If we had equivalent-sized protests in Australia, a lot of people would just sort of flick on TV, flick off TV, yawn, and go, "Well, the system's stable." Every system's stable until it isn't.
Well, I think you have to have fundamental economic problems, and it's typically economic hardship, hunger that drives people to those huge protests, and that's where you start to see regime change. I mean, French Revolution and all of that, and perhaps that's what's happening in Iran, because they've got serious economic troubles there now, and that's. And obviously people are fed up with the regime too, but I think it's the underlying economic situation that is contributing to it in large part.
Yeah, it certainly doesn't help. Although, I mean, it's not clear to me that France in 1770 was that much poorer than France in 1730. So, if anything, they were starting to get richer, which may have been the problem leading into the French Revolution.
I think we'll have to have another session on the French Revolution. Just to go through the history of it.
That would be worth it. I do have one of my pet theories that the French Revolution was the source of most things that went wrong in the Western world. Right. So you had like the sort of the British Revolution. Too soon to tell you. The British Revolution gave us all of these sort of positive trends. The French Revolution gave us all the negative trends. And those two revolutions have basically been in a race in the Western imagination. And when the French Revolution is winning the race, we are going backwards. But I could do a whole episode on that. I could do an hour on that. Anyway, we've come up to an hour 40, which is well over what we usually do. But we're also coming up to 1,000 people live. So I almost feel guilty
can we show
off and leaving you.
But can we show one last comment? I like, Lyndon's got Argentina's looking better. So a bright spot somewhere in the world.
And at least they play rugby, right? So we'll have something to bond over. We'll have to teach them how to play cricket. Don't get the English to teach them. That wouldn't work. But anyway, with that jibe against my English friends, everyone who's been watching us, thank you very much. This is the Death and Taxes podcast, brought to you by the Australian Taxpayers Alliance with me, John Humphreys, and that guy, I don't know what side you're on when people can see it, Gene Tunny. We are here most weeks. We try to be here weekly. We haven't been perfect at it lately, but we will be better this year. New Year's resolution, Gene. We're going to be doing this weekly. This is 7:30 Queensland time, God's own time, 8:30 for you dirty Southerners on the Thursday night. So please duck in each Thursday night. We'll have a chat. Let's discover something and discuss the big issues of the day, plus Gene's economic roundup, plus taking your questions. You can find us on taxpayers.org.au, on the YouTubes. Please, if you're watching now, I know a lot of you are watching on X now. Thanks. Give us a follow, give it a like, give it a share. Beautiful. Could I also encourage you, duck over to YouTube, look for Australian Taxpayers Alliance, and give us a follow there as well. It really helps to boost those algorithms in all of the different social medias. You can also find Gene on X, the link in the description down below. And you can find us on Facebook if you are sufficiently old that you still use Facebook for anything other than Marketplace. So thank you everyone for tuning in. Stay happy, stay free, and see you again next week.
Thanks everyone.